How are you all doing? Now we just heard the thing about Unity. Wow. So Unity have merged with a company that really doesn't have its focus on gameplay. I'm not sure what it is that they're doing, but I kind of view it like this, that the problem with the video game industry is an independent game development is that it's a bit like the gold rush. It's sort of like people are all swept up with the idea because of the passion for video games, you know, that they could make games independently and put them out and have people play them. And the reason for doing this is not really money. People are not doing it for money. People do that not because they expect to become rich from their game, but they do it because of the love of video games and with the idea that some people are going to play their game, and it just sort of adds to the, you know, ecology, if you will, of video games. How naive. I got burned, and I don't mean that in a bad way, it's just, it is naive. And I got wise to this a very long time ago because I got burnt up by that, you know, in the 90s as an independent game developer. And it's a tough thing. The problem is the video game development is, unless you have enough investment and backing to sort of put certain things in place to make it a little bit less of a lottery, it's a lottery. You know, and you can spend a day writing a simple game like Flappy Bird and then become a millionaire and then have that ruin your life, which is an interesting story. Or you can, you know, spend several years making a game, release it of the love of the thing. So for me, you know, Kick-Off Revival, it was a game made out of love. And me trying to love the thing that I'd created that sort of, in some ways, I didn't like because of what it did. It's sort of, probably in terms of game, me as a game developer, it did the worst possible thing. It didn't open any doors for me. I didn't get to make all the games I wanted to make. It was a bit disappointing, really. And you know, people might look at that and say, well, how could that happen? It can happen really easily because you don't, as an independent game developer, control anything. You don't control the audience, you don't control the market. All you control is the game that you make. And when you put it out there, you make it for love, like I did. You know, some kind of romantic idea of coming back after 20 years and I'm sorry, I got this, I'm human, you know, idea, I'm passionate about what I do, you know. I tried it again, and it, you know, I did have in mind that maybe they would generate enough revenue that I could continue to do that, which doesn't seem so terrible a desire, but in the end, it was done out of love, and if it was going to generate any revenue, that would enable me to continue doing what I love. But that isn't what happened. It's like everything else is fine. But the hate, people not liking the game is fine. But the hate, there were plenty of people who liked the game. But the press, did they bother to check into that? No. I mean, that isn't what games are about. Not really. It should be about that. It should be about the creators creating the game and doing something that they love and contributing to the... But that isn't what we do as human beings. We are so fantastically good at ruining everything that is beautiful. It's the thing we are supremely good at as human beings. We destroy our environment, but we destroy our art too. And the two things are inextricably linked. It's not a coincidence that we destroy our environment and we destroy the things that we create in terms of art and beauty. You know, governments cut funding to the arts because they think, it's not going to help us get anywhere. As if there is somewhere to go. Where is there to go? That's a bit of a question, isn't it? Where is there for us to all go? Where are we all going? Got to have growth. Got to make things better. Got to improve everything, yes. Great. To what end? And at some point, somebody goes and realises they slam into this wall. Maybe it would be the richest person in the world might one day ask that question, where are we going? And they'll look up at the stars, look into the sky, and they'll say, we're going to Mars. When you get to Mars, what then? This drive to forever improve things in a kind of tangible, numerical, measurable way. That is the way that we are. That is what we have become. And in doing so, in this drive for numerical excellence, we destroy everything that is beautiful. We destroy the relationships between people. We destroy the family. We destroy the environment. We destroy music. We destroy literature. We turn things like poetry into some kind of ultra niche that only weird people engage in. And what's left? And you look at where the world is going. We're so good at destroying everything that is beautiful. You tell me I'm wrong. You tell me where there is a government that is nurturing beauty. You tell me where the political agenda, where the manifestos of politicians are focused around beauty. You tell me, show me where that is, because I'd say that that's very important. It is all part of the ineffable. And the question is, can you be effed? Now, the point is with the word ineffable is a lovely word. It's a very important word, and it's a word that isn't used very much, which is symptomatic of the human condition currently. The thing is that the word ineffable means, it's something that cannot be said. Ineffable is something that cannot be described in words. You can see how the word effed is kind of connected, I believe, to the word said. So if you say ineffable, it's almost like unsaidable or unsayable. I believe there's a connection, but someone who's an expert in words can correct me, I'm sure. If something is ineffable, you can't put it into words. Have you ever wondered about that? The richness of experience that lies beyond that can be put into words. There's so much. The feeling that you get in the morning on a slightly damp day and you step out, and that freshness, because it had just been raining, overnight, and the freshness hits you in the face, and it's a certain feeling, right? That experience doesn't have there's no way for us to communicate that experience with just plain words. You can circle around things like that. Like, for example, I don't know, the feeling that you get when you watch a seagull sort of just catch the wind and go. It's got to. Okay, you want something a little less. All right. The feeling that you get when you watch a racing car pull off at the start of a race, that also has a certain. There's something going on there, isn't there? Can you see it? I can see it. I'll tell you something else. The problem with these things, bringing up these examples, is that I'm trying to describe them, so it's difficult. How do you describe the ineffable? Poetry is what that is for, right? That's why poetry is important. It's to remind us we can focus on. Have you ever walked along, say, in the countryside in some way, or just anywhere that isn't like in the city? Okay, and as you're walking along, you see a sort of semi-clearing. There may be some trees or bushes or whatever, and there's this little opening, a place that looks inviting, like you could almost go and sit down in there. Right? That has a certain feeling. At least it does to me. I recognize it. It's ineffable, but it's definitely there. And then, of course, we have music. Music. Is there anything more ineffable than music? I'm working really hard at playing a number of different musical instruments right now. And say, for example, on the flute, not going to play it, but I got this during lockdown, and it's coming along quite well. But I find myself increasingly just not playing along to anything, but just letting whatever comes come out, and all of the complex chains of notes that you can create. They are like a language, but I don't know what they're saying. They don't say anything, not intellectually. It's not saying anything tangible. It's not effable, but it's definitely there. It's real. And each, chain of intervals that make up a melody, there is a sense to how they should be. That if you sort of do this over here, then you can sort of do a counterpoint thing over there, and this balances the thing out, and it's got the beginning, the middle, and the end. How you end a phrase, how you begin a phrase, how you make the phrase interesting in the middle, the little surprises that you get. It's an amazing journey that goes on, and none of it is effable. It's totally non-intellectually based. You can try and analyse it, I'm sure. People do, but they never get anywhere. They never really get down to the experience, because you can't get to that experience, because that experience is ineffable. And the point is that experience is living. That experience is the waking up in the morning and opening your eyes. That experience is the taste of your breakfast when you eat it, the cup of coffee in the morning, the sound the bus makes as it goes down the road, the way the light reflects off the tarmac, the shimmer in a hot day and from the heat, the sound of voices, of laughter, the toot of a car horn. These things, you can say toot of a car horn, but it has a kind of a feeling dependent on the context, how it can make you feel. You feel that emotion, that feeling is ineffable, and it's the most important thing. So can you be effed? No, you can't. You can be described, You can be measured. You can be given an age. You can be given an identity. You can be given a name. You can have a job. You can have a certain amount of money in your bank account. You can have an address, but none of these things are you. You are what's left when you remove everything that can be measured. And this is part of the way in which humanity destroys everything that is beautiful. Because instead of focusing on that experience, instead of that experience being enough, we want more. And I've struggled with this all my life, like everybody else. There is no more. It's not about more. So I've stopped measuring. I try. Difficult. In this dark times that we're looking at right now. It's scary. I mean, the wonderful technology that we have, the technology that allows me to talk to you right now, is the same technology that allows us to look at the oncoming train that's potentially going to run. I mean, we're seeing everything in real time here in a way that we've never really been able to before. And it's scary. And so what do? We afraid? What's there to be afraid of? Is it rational? There's nothing we can do. We can just take it one day at a time. Because ultimately, all we have is the present. Everything else is an illusion. All the measuring is relatively meaningless in the end. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that, hey, we should give up all of our technology and money and all this. And none of this is actually in itself bad, right? The point is that we can't and shouldn't, well, we can and we are, but we shouldn't leave the ineffable behind to exist only as the effable. Because, in a sense, if we do that, if we become a people that can only identify with what can be put into words and discard as useless that which is ineffable, the problem is that the effable only has meaning because of the ineffable. And that is the bit that is forgotten. This is why, a country devoid of any artistic experience, of any experiential value, a country that does not value the things that are fundamental to our experience, right? Everything else that then becomes the perceived value, for example, money or status or security or whatever else, it becomes utterly meaningless. Money in your bank account is only meaningful because of the ineffable part of you that gives it meaning. And this is where the paradox is. And I say that again, the ineffable part of you is what gives the effable its meaning. And if you lose the ineffable part of you, right, then everything that can be measured, everything that can be described, everything that can be partitioned, everything that can be allocated, and all the perceived measured progress that we make is all for nothing. Because ultimately we greet each day as an ineffable thing, right? And that's why it's so dangerous that we devalue and we push away art and philosophy. And nobody talks philosophy. Look now, we've got so much ability to communicate between us, but where is the genuine dance of philosophical argument? Where does it happen? I mean, I've tried, I've gone around and I've looked, like going on Discord and looking for good philosophical conversations. So hard to find. You don't find them because they just, in the end, they get destroyed by people who don't get it. Don't get what philosophy is. Philosophy has been sort of elevated to some kind of, and pushed aside to some kind of niche thing that, only extreme intellectuals that really don't have any common sense and don't have any connection with the world. That's where the thing that they do. When in actual fact, what philosophy is a dance of the mind. Dance with the mind. The thing about a dance is it doesn't have a purpose. See? We have to have a purpose in everything we do. For what purpose do we need to have a purpose? As I said, where are we going? The purpose of a dance is to dance. The purpose of a philosophical discussion is to have a philosophical discussion. The purpose of getting up in the morning is to live the day. The purpose of living is to live. Well, you start looking at that and it's like, it seems a bit obvious. Well, yeah, it's obvious if you only stick to literal interpretation and forget the experiential side. Do you see what I'm saying? Do you see where we're going? The dark place that we'll end up. Now, I'm not religious, but sometimes it's useful and quite entertaining, frankly, to look at the teachings of Jesus and observe how, in a lot of modern interpretations of Christianity, the actual key teachings of Jesus are completely ignored. Well, there's one story is, of course, where Jesus cast the money lenders out of the temple. It's very interesting that in general discussion about Christianity, this is rarely brought up because it was a bit embarrassing, really. In this world that likes to measure everything and is, very capitalistically orientated, it's all about money being the thing that drives everything, obsession with wealth and so on. Well, strictly, it's obsession with money. It's perhaps a little embarrassing. You could see that, so maybe it sounds a little bit kind of sort of left wing, doesn't it? Let's cast the money. But yeah, all right. I suppose you could say, well, yes, you don't want bankers in the church. But you see, there's a metaphor. It's a metaphor among beyond the whether the story was, literally that way. It is also metaphorical. It's also basically saying that, it's the other side or the same argument along the same track as saying, let's cast the effable to one side, at least for a bit, and let's just from time to time have a space where we can focus on the ineffable. So I'm going around like this and come back to video games. Think about what's happening right now with video games and this effable ineffable thing. for a long period of time, over the past 30 years, 40 years, there's been a gradual move away from the exciting origins of video games that were full of the ineffable, gameplay being quite ineffable. You see, what makes great gameplay? We really don't know. Theories exist. I know how to do gameplay. Yes. Could I teach it? But that's a different question. There are many things that people can be good at and they're difficult to teach. The first sign that you're talking about something that's ineffable is when it's difficult to teach. Because the only way really to teach it is to show it. You can't really describe it, okay? And there's some things that then people just won't pick up. It's like, how could I teach anybody how to make a tune? I'm good at making tunes. I can make earworms and they get stuck in people's heads. I can do that. Why is it that I can do that? I don't know. It might be just the way my brain is wired up or whatever. Could I teach it? I could certainly give you tips on how to focus your attention to sort of help you be able to develop tunes. But ultimately, there isn't a formula for it. It is in the land of the ineffable. And the same thing is true with gameplay. So it's actually difficult to teach how to create great games. But you see, the problem is that the industry, as the nature of industry, is very focused on measurement and numbers and things that can be analysed, and entirely the effable, and everything gravitates towards that, as we do what we do as human beings and destroy everything that is beautiful. You see, the destruction of the things that are beautiful is actually the focus upon the things that can be measured. So by measuring, we destroy. And that it's not so surprising. You might think, what do you mean by measuring we destroy? Yeah, there's a bit of philosophy here, but it's useful to understand that the danger of measuring. Because when you measure, what you are doing is cutting things up. There's actually no way of measuring without putting some kind of ruler. You're basically dividing things up. And by that division, you actually are destroying something. I don't know, bear with me. You might not be modifying the actual thing that you are measuring if it's a non-destructive measurement. You might not destroy it physically. But what you are doing is destroying the ineffable focus. So it destroys the way of looking at it. Actually, for people who studied video games will know exactly what I mean here. If you're not, because I know you might be struggling with this, but it's like one of the best ways of not destroying, but let's say damaging or making it hard for you to appreciate video games or enjoy video games. Let me put it that way. Something that can make it difficult for you to enjoy video games, and it's a warning that's actually made to people who want to study video games, is that once they begin to dissect video games and study video games and seek to understand video games, they will begin to lose their ability to enjoy them. You see, that's because in the studying of video games, you are measuring them, you're dividing them up, you're classifying them, you're figuring out how you can sort of break it down to understand it. And you are just then destroying it, at least your relationship with the thing, because instead of it being something that you just experience, it now becomes something that you are aware of, that you are pulling out effable things, so that The ultimate experience always remains ineffable. The experience and feeling that you have, just like the same when you watch a good film. When you finish with a good film and it leaves you feeling somewhat changed in some way, excited, invigorated, sometimes it actually will change your perspective on life if it's a really powerful film. That's an ineffable change that's happened, and it's a personal thing that's happened to you. When you start cutting things up and dividing things up, you are actually attacking that experience, and it takes a long time to eventually be able to get back to the innocence. And many examples of this are given within arts. Is that the beginning, there's an old Zen thing that says, in the beginning mountains were mountains and waters were waters, but as I began to understand the Tao or whatever, as I began to gain understanding, I realized that waters are not waters and mountains are not mountains. But then when I truly began to understand, when I truly grasped it, I realized that once again, waters were waters and mountains were mountains, it sounds a bit kind of weird, but there is a logic to it, and it's a great truth that at the beginning, when you are naive, you have the ability, in a way, to be creative beyond what can happen as you start to develop your technique. There's a kind of something special that exists, but it's not very sophisticated. And so then, of course, you start thinking about what you're doing. It's a bit like beginner's luck. You start thinking about what you're doing. You think, how can I improve it? Oh, that was interesting. And you start measuring it and analysing it. And that's great. And you're improving your technique. But what's happening at the same time is you're losing your innocence. And you have to go through a huge arc. To become a master in something, you need to transcend the technique. It's interesting. You have to go all the way to the other side where you have all of the tools and you've been there, but you leave it behind, and you enhanced by everything you have learnt, yes, but you sort of dive in once again to the naivety that allows you to have that creative experience, because in the end what matters is, again, the ineffable. It's like you want that. You can use everything else as a kind of tool to help enhance things and so on, but in the end what matters is that. So in video games, the analogy for this is gameplay more than anything. It's why video games, right, have evolved into discussions about everything, or discussions about video games, everything except gameplay. Gameplay is the last thing. Although it's funny because you'll hear people say, well, games need to be fun. Well, nobody knows what fun is. Right? Because fun. What is fun? It's ineffable. Nobody knows what fun is. And the surest way for you to destroy fun is to start measuring it. That's what's wrong with things like loot boxes. Loot boxes are not fun. I mean, you could say, okay, they're exploitative, and it's true. It's a gambling mechanic. It's the most basic form of, addiction-driven interaction that you can do. It's like, what's in the box? Let's open it and see. The thing is that what's in the box ends up being just the same thing over and over and over again. Or, well, different things, but they only differ in meaningless ways. Because there's got to be meaning. Because the fun, right, the ineffable part, is what counts. And there's only so much fun you can have opening boxes. Maybe it's fun the first time, second time, third time, but the 50th time? And then why do people do it? They do it because they want to advance. Why do they want to advance? They want to advance because they want to have a better skin, or they want to show off, or they want to... And there's these things. There's nothing to do with fun. As soon as you place a value on fun fun becomes worthless. Amazing. As soon as you say, I must have fun, you will not have fun. This is how we destroyed video games. Because we look at it and say, I don't know how to talk about gameplay, but I do know how to talk about money. I do know how to talk about, number of people playing our game. We can measure that. And we can come up with all kinds of metrics and KPIs. Every measurements in there, all things that might be indicative of fun. Maybe. But we don't really care. I mean, we don't really care if it's fun or not, as long as we know we've got people playing our game. And what you get is a kind of reduction of games to being just a thing that is there as part of a mechanism for effect pumping money around. And the thing is that you would think that you couldn't get away with that, because what you would be doing is gradually making the thing less fun. But what you have is a new generation that comes, and they get hooked into the base mechanics, and that's good enough for them. He says you can make it work that way, because for pity's sake, gambling is a pretty large industry, and let's face it, gambling is pretty simple when it comes to the mechanic. And there was a parody game that was done, which was called Cow Clicker. And it was done as a parody, and the person who created the game shut the game off because the parody became a reality. It became this hugely addictive game. All you did was just click on a cow and it went moo. So the point here is that, yes, you can have your free-to-play games that get the younger generation of gamers hooked. Sure. But what's it doing to the overall level of fun? It's the same thing that happens with other areas of our lives. Like, wouldn't it be great if society valued experiential eating? That's eating things that have been made, let's say, with love. This thing about things made with love is very interesting. It's like, what does it even mean? I mean, I know that there are certain restaurants that I go to, and the food has been made with love. It's like you can tell it's well crafted, because the cook, the chef, knows what they are doing, and it isn't just the same old. There's something special about it, and we all know we have that experience from time to time, right? But what we feed our children is McDonald's. So it's, children don't have a sophisticated palate, but I actually disagree. I think that if you just introduce the children to simple flavours, the sugary things, and the tangy things, just you can do that, and it makes sense to do that if you want to make money. But it doesn't make sense to do that if you want to enrich the lives of people, and that's where everything goes wrong. And it's like this everywhere. It's like this with music. What the hell happened to music in the 20th century? Music had this beautiful evolution. The most popular form of music for a great part of the 20th century was jazz. I found myself thinking today, what went wrong? The popularity of jazz wasn't to do with fashion. How could it be to do with fashion? Jazz in America was driven mostly, it came from the black community. I mean, Louis Armstrong was the first, great jazz musician of the 20th century. The kind of, from Louis Armstrong came everything else. It's like you can't really, there was something special that was happening there. And you can't say that it was an easy thing for people to get sort of absorbed into, because it was complicated music. It wasn't simple music, but it was like the pop music of today. And it was rich. It had a deep meaning and feeling. It was incredibly ineffable. Hey, but you can break that. You can destroy that. What you do is you start creating and popularizing music that is simple and that's easy to digest. And it's just the same thing as with junk food. We created, by comparison, junk music. It didn't happen immediately, but it happened over a period of time. So I'm not saying, as other forms of music took over from jazz, I'm not saying that they were inferior. They were just different, but it became eventually a slide into the inferior, so that now, now what you have is music that's generated by algorithms, and as far as I can tell, this is what happens. I mean, it'd be great to be corrected here, but I think in effect, hit songs now are mostly algorithmic. And nobody really knows who wrote them, and it doesn't matter who actually wrote them, as they're probably almost written by a machine. But what you have are investors that will push that song, right, to see if it can become viral and help it become viral, and that those people are the ones who are credited with being songwriters. And then they share the royalties from it, but they're not actually songwriters. That's my theory. They're not really songwriters at all, because the songs almost write themselves now. But they are. It's a bit like investing in NFTs. Ironically, it's like you've got people investing in a tune, investing in earworms. But it's not actually, an artistic endeavour. It's just a case of, can we create something that will replicate really well and generate us money? Because in the end, it's just about the money and it's not about the art. But the side effect of this is we destroy everything that is important about music. So it's no longer about a communication of feeling. Not really. And the funny thing is that Kate Bush is top of the charts. But I take Kate Bush's top of the charts. Yeah, it's because people got exposed to her music. Or Nick Drake, sad story of Nick Drake. Nick Drake was one of the best British songwriters that ever lived. He was amazing as a songwriter. Nobody knew about him really until one day there was an advert for, of all things, a car, and they used one of his songs, and so it got exposure. And then suddenly, Kate Bush's song "Running Up That Hill" is a really good song, and now lots of people have realised that. So don't tell me it's got to do with nostalgia. It's got frack all to do with nostalgia. It's like good music is good music regardless. There are two elements to getting that to be accepted again. One is that there has to be exposure to it. But the other one is there also has to be the palate for it. A certain amount of, refinement within the audience will help too. But where are the young people of today going to get that? The ineffable is so important. When you look at what's happening politically, it's the same old story. Do you know that the right wing are very obsessed with facts and figures and measurements and delineations, separation, them and us, these people, those people, division. It's because they're obsessed with measurement. all those lefties, those are the mushy ones. They're the ones that, in the Alan Watts's words, they're the squigglies, the squiggles, the squiggles and the squares. The right, the extreme right are the squares, and the left wing, or not left wing, it's anybody. In fact, it's not even anybody left of centre anymore. It's basically anywhere, towards the centre at all. Anything that is not right wing has become left wing. It's quite funny, really, if it wasn't so sad. But that's the thing. The people on the left are comfortable with not having everything absolutely measured. They really are, because more comfortable with it, because you have to be, because you're not measuring. To be woke, which is a stupid word. I mean, it's like it's the right wing use the word woke as a criticism when the word woke is connected to the word wake. So let me tell you something. In Buddhism, there's the Buddha. Now, it's not the Buddha, it's a Buddha. And sometimes there's a big Buddha. So the Buddha is really just a Buddha that was a pretty big Buddha. But Buddha is not a name. It's a word that means, that comes from Bud, which means to awaken. Well, Buddha means the awakened one. So, what a coincidence. The whole thing of enlightenment, which is something that, for some reason has a sheen on it that causes people to sort of repel at the thought. But it's not that weird, really. It's... In Buddhism, enlightenment is basically the same thing as waking up. And so the word woke is used as a criticism. It's almost like pointing out anybody who at all is in danger of becoming enlightened or has, and call them woke. You woke up. It's like invasion of the body, in body snatchers, the thing, it feels like that sometimes. Have you seen that film where the aliens that invaded took over people's bodies? If they ever see anybody smile or show emotion, then that's an indication that they're someone that's a normal human and hasn't been taken over. And so all the others just point at them and sort of yell this horrible scream. It's quite scary. The end of that film is it's brutal. The end of that film is so brutal. But you see, it's a metaphor as well. Oh my word. Here's somebody who's basically saying, don't be a dick to other people. And it's like, whoa, woke. Except, of course, it's people who use the word woke, they're not going to admit to that, but they're going to go, no. The woke people are the nasty people. It's such a flipping mind game, isn't it? So the point with enlightenment is simply that you actually, I'm going to summarize it my own way. I'm going to say that you're able to fully appreciate the ineffable. That's really what being enlightened is. You can also appreciate the effable, but the appreciation of the effable is not getting in the way of your appreciation of the ineffable. It's basically you're able to appreciate living and life for its core fundamental experience, free of the encumbrances of, desire that distracts you from that. It's really quite simple. And Buddhist masters that were asked, there was one, I can't remember his name, who it was, but was asked what enlightenment was like, and the answer he gave was, oh, it's just like normal existence, only 2 inches off the ground. Which I think is quite kind of cute. It's like, oh, it might be disappointing for anybody who's thinking, oh, at some point I'll get around to trying to seek enlightenment. No, it's not anything that you can imagine it to be. It just is, In fact, the word nirvana, which is another word for it, basically means to breathe out. It's basically just a sigh. It's basically just go, There's nothing else. See, it doesn't have to be anything else. Like games don't have to be anything else other than fun. And what pain here, because you see this and you go, what it's okay. What you do is that you just don't do anything. What you do is you go, and it's okay. And it's okay that I was a video game developer, and it's okay that I had a successful game, and it's okay that nothing came of it, and it's okay that we're in a world which is going to hell. It's okay. It's all okay. Everything is fine, because ultimately the only thing that matters really is the ineffable. And so tomorrow when you get up, you can look out of your window and say, here we are. Whatever happens, bring it on. Because this is it. And that's okay. There's nothing to chase. There's nothing to hold on to. There's nothing to seek. There's nothing to be. Just do what you naturally feel is the right thing to do, which includes things like going to work and looking after your children and taking care of business and whatever else you need to do. You do it, but you do it because it's your experience, because it's what you are, because it just is. Don't second guess it. Don't have hang-ups. That's Zen. Zen is living a life without hang-ups. Someone who's a master in Zen will never get hung up. Simple as that. They're just able to be themselves, and there's no hesitation, it's just boom. And treat the day like that. I've tried really hard recently to stop second guessing myself. That email. I've been known to write an email and read it like 10 times, 20 times, and try to figure out how the words could be misinterpreted and try to capture it. It's just like, no. Now I just go, la 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 da 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 da. Oh yeah, maybe that. Yeah, I'll do this. But yeah, okay, it's good enough. Go. It's like you've got to trust yourself. You see, trusting yourself has to do with the ineffable as well. You trust yourself. What does it mean? It means you feel it's okay to do what you're going to do. It's okay to get up in the morning. Honestly, with the number of things that there is that we can do. I have this problem at weekends, that during the week I'm doing work, and what I choose to do in my work is fairly limited number of options, right? Because that's fairly clear, the things that I need to do. But that's actually quite tiring. And then it gets to the evening or the weekends, and suddenly it's like, what shall I do now? There's so much I could do. And this used to be a huge problem. Still is a little bit. But there's a way around that, and that's just stop second guessing. I found myself doing this, and I'm like, I could play the flute. Oh, well, but it's like, no, wait a minute, what are you doing? You're questioning yourself. It's like, play the flute because you feel like playing the flute. Doesn't have to be a reason you feel like playing the flute. Do I need to sort of get some kind of executive order sorted out? See, you don't, and then while I'm playing the flute, and it's like, I've been playing the flute a bit. Maybe I should play something else. Stop it! Just keep playing the flute. What are you doing? It's like you'll stop playing the flute when it's time to stop playing the flute. You don't need to analyse this. And it's been so hard for me, but I can recommend trying to do this. When you go, okay, I'm just going to not worry about it. I'll just carry on playing the flute. And the funny thing is, eventually, I feel tired of playing the flute. And then it's like, you're feeling tired of playing the flute. Maybe you should play the flute some more. Stop it! No, it's time to put the flute away because I've had enough flute. Do you see? We've lost as human beings our ability to trust what we want. Ooh, that's scary. Because, again, what we want is ineffable. You can't put a recipe down in a book, but we fill our children's heads with the rules, that they've engagement, They tell you things. Oh, learning a musical instrument is really hard. No, it isn't. It is not hard. It's no harder than walking. It only becomes or feels hard because somebody told you it was hard. So I play violin. Violin was supposed to be the really hard instrument. Admittedly, it took a while to get to the point where I felt like I could play it without people running screaming. But that's not the point. It's the idea that playing an instrument is hard is useless and meaningless. It doesn't help. It's not useful in any way. It's an ineffable concept that gets in the way of the ineffable, which is just learning to play a musical instrument. And you do it, and there's no secret to this. You can go on YouTube and learn how to play any musical instrument. There's someone who's really willing to teach you. I'll give you a secret. You don't need any of that. All you need to do is you pick up the instrument, whatever instrument it is, maybe with the exception of piano. Piano is a bit more complicated, I think. But this is especially true of instruments where you're playing a single note, so like flute or a saxophone or a trumpet or singing. And just try it. Just work on it and keep trying. And eventually you'll start to figure it out. Okay? And you can also go get a teacher. But what I found about teachers is the teachers, there's an interesting dynamic, Teachers need students. What do teachers need? Students. So what do they do? They can't help it. It's not in their interest for you to learn too quickly. So I tend to do is I have used some teachers, but my most successful results with teachers occasionally, like I've had one violin lesson, and it was very useful, and I had it at the time when it felt like the right time to have a violin lesson, and I felt no compunction to have any more after that. It had served its purpose. Maybe at some point I'll have another one when I feel ready. But the most important thing is that you keep playing. That's it. That's the secret. You keep trying. On whatever you want to do, you keep trying. Anyway, to get back to video games and what's happened with Unity, right? Unity have fallen into the trap at this point of focusing entirely on money. Now, I can understand that because they expanded and they have a big company and then they're employing a lot of people. And in fact, they've had to lay off some people. And once you get into that stage, the company's purpose becomes just to survive. And then, all bets are off. But it's a shame. I do wonder why companies need to get so big. You've got a huge company producing a piece of software that is huge and is complicated. But sometimes I wonder if it's too huge and too complicated and the company's too big. So that then it becomes a case of the rules of survival overrule the purpose of the company. The purpose of the company in Unity's case should be to enable the creation of wonderful, fun games. But that isn't what's happened in practice. The Unity engine was very good at attracting people in. So all kinds of people would start making games with Unity. And then they can skim off that. Now, first of all, Unity, if you want to, you can use the free version, but there are good reasons for wanting to use the commercial version. Then you've got the asset store. So there are people creating assets that can be, and I've spent money on the asset store for games that will never make any money, you see. And that's because I was prototyping with them and so on. But I've spent money on that, and I've spent money on Unity, and I shipped a game that, it's not. The reason I did kick off Revival is that it was funded. Sony paid for the development of it. Very little money actually for a video game, but they paid that, and it enabled me to work on the game. Instead of, doing it in my spare time, for example. So there was the motivation was there for me to do that. And that was important, but for me. But it ends up in a situation where where in the process of doing a game, the engine, I kind of lost my track a little bit there, but the engine, right, should be there to make it easy for you to ship, right? But what happens, unfortunately, is that Unity makes it very easy to start, but doesn't make it very easy to finish. And it isn't because it deliberately makes it difficult to finish. It's because its entire business model is based around getting numbers of people in to the game. So everything they focus on is adding features and adding to the complexity of things and making it more appealing and creating the impression that you can compete against other engines and that you'll be able to ship, games on multiple platforms and all of this stuff. And on paper, you can. But the reality is that when you actually come to shipping, especially on consoles and so on, it becomes hell. And I know because I had to do it with 3 different platforms for Kickoff Revival. It was a nightmare. I never do it again. I actually think it was a mistake that I used Unity. I wish I had just made my own engine, and I would have been in a better place if I had. But I didn't, and so I ended up in the same situation again. See, so the problem with Unity is that it's built around just generating numbers. In the same way that much of the internet is based around, clicks. It's like clickbait on videos, that actually works. People actually fall for clickbait. Well, in a way, I'm not saying this is intentional. It wasn't intentional, I'm sure, but Unity became a kind of game bait, and it sucked in all of these indie game developers with a dream of whatever it was. Okay, in 2 successive years on Steam, there was something like 7,000 games released each year. And 90% of the revenue that was generated went to the top 10 games. And it doesn't take much calculation to see that of those 7,000 games, there were probably only 100 that broke even, that could have broken even. So that's a lot of disappointment. And the low entry level of Unity fueled that. So that the end result is it's a kind of Ponzi scheme or multi-level marketing practically. It's like you've got the asset store. People would start, so many people would try to make a game and they weren't getting anywhere with the game. And then I mean, even Unity, who started a game in order to learn how they use their own tool to make games, gave up on their own game that they were making, which is quite interesting. Yeah, what people would do is give up on their game and then put the assets for the game that they made on the asset store. See, so then you've got people generating content on a sub-lottery of the bigger lottery, which is like, maybe you make an asset that, so there's some assets there for doing things like, pathfinding, or I don't know, some tools that are kind of, and they're very popular. Or UI tools. Eventually, some of them, there's just business models. Some of them get bought out by Unity, and it get put into the engine, But there's kind of like, you've got the bigger lottery, which is, whether your game is actually going to do anything in the market. And then you've got the sub lottery, which is the, will the assets from your failed game, win the lottery on the asset store. And it's not surprising that basically Unity is likely to end up in a nosedive. The only way that it could avoid that is if they stop focusing on all the, they start. It's not they should stop focusing on all the periphery stuff, but they should have a focus on encouraging somehow fun back into both the games themselves and also the making of the games. Making a game in Unity is not fun. It's fun to start. At the beginning it's fun. But then when you actually start trying to get to the hard part of making a game, which is most of it, it's not fun at all. And so it's a sad missed opportunity. And I'm not trying to say that what they did was deliberate, but in the end we have to accept that the platform holders that are out there, and it's not just Unity, where they have embraced indie game development, they've actually done nothing of the sort. They haven't embraced indie game development at all. What they have done is fueled a gold rush for indie game development. Big promises, you'll get 60% royalties, 70% royalties, 80, 90. You could go to 99% royalty. It wouldn't make any difference. You'd hardly have any more games breaking even. What's neat, because there's just too many. There's too many games. And then also the audience, spoilt for choice, they start comparing, AAA titles with indie titles, and they don't understand what's going on, and they get hugely toxic, and they start trying to complain. You've got some independent game developer who wants to do something independent, so it's like, they may have something to say, or they may be trying to do some gameplay in a different way to the mainstream, and they get hated on as if they're some kind of threat to their own existence in some way, and it's just, it's nuts. So you've got the toxicity as well. So not only do you have virtually no chance of actually even breaking even, you have the toxicity too. And it's fueled by just this, come on everybody, but you see how it works? Sony have had this model for years. 15 years ago, when the PlayStation 2 had reached, see if I get the 4 million, had sold 4 million units. There were 40 million games that had been sold. There were 400 titles, if I remember rightly. And of those 400 titles, only 17 had made a profit. What? That's crazy. Only 17 titles made a profit. What of all the losses that were there? Loss after loss after loss. What's going on with that? And here's the trick, though. Sony made a profit on all of them. The platform holders make a profit on loss-making games. Now, you tell me if that is ethically, it's totally legal, but could you say it's ethical? Well, in the case of 15 years ago and PlayStation 2, everybody had their shot at it. And many publishers got burned and the rest of it. You can say that was all business fair. But what's happened now is that you've had all of these indie developers get caught up in it, and so they're doing the same thing. It's like so many of them, all those titles and so on. But the platform holders make a profit on the back of every loss-making game developer. And I think at this point, indie is, I could not go with a platform holder again. I'll never go with a platform holder again. I'm very dubious about going with anybody's engine. I might go with Unreal. And the main reason for that is because one has access to the source code, so one can fix it. And you can also separate, because it's in C++ rather than C# and so on, it's easier to separate your gameplay from the engine. So I could write a game with the game code. It's totally portable. I could ditch the engine and replace it with my own engine. That's much harder to do with Unity. So the option of, especially if the engine itself goes, that's happened to me, by the way. Because there was this thing called renderware, and so when I was working on football games in the 2000s, I had 2 different contracts. One was with a company called Precision in Italy, and the other one was with a company I won't mention because I don't really want to mention them, thank you, and they're shut down anyway, which wasn't a surprise that would happen. But we were using renderware. So again, using middleware, and then renderware got bought out by EA. My heart sank when that happened. Hey, I'm trying to release a revolutionary football game in terms of gameplay, something that could compete with FIFA if it was given a chance, and it's using an engine that's just been bought by EA. And of course they did the utterly predictable thing. They basically stopped development of it and took it all internal. And then this left high and dry a huge number of game developers that have been relying on their engine. Incidentally, I think there is a risk that that's going to happen with Unity now, because it feels like it could, and so that would be a concern. So if you put all your eggs in a basket that can be whipped away, and then given that you're writing in C# in Unity, it's a harder job to figure out how to get that code out. I mean, you can still do it, but you know. So you know, anyway, look, where am I going with this? So what I'm going with this is to come back to this thing, you know, the ineffable. We need to value the ineffable, right? We need to be effed about the ineffable. we really do. And we need to do that within our lives, within our activities, within our art, with our video games, with our environment, with our politics. And ultimately, if we don't do that, what will happen is that we become detached from reality. In effect, you can see that's happening. We mustn't have that happen. Right? Well, actually, it doesn't matter. That's the thing. It's one of those things that the more that we struggle, the worse it becomes. And I'll leave with that guy, Oppenheimer, I think, said this. I think it was his quote. It's like, it's quite clear that we're all going to hell fast. But the only way that we can stop that is if we feel that we don't need to. In other words, it's okay. Let it be. The biggest chance that we have for saving the planet and saving us and the ineffable and everything that is beautiful, that we are so fantastic as human beings at destroying, is to accept that we don't need to protect it. We don't need to stop it. We don't need to change anything. Because we mess around with stuff all the time. This is so hard to do. I know it just sounds a bit contradictory. You know? The only way we can stop us going to hell is if we realise that we don't need to stop us going to hell. And if you can get into that space and you can get up every morning, you can take a breath and you just get on and do what you need to do, and you appreciate and enjoy the experience, and you trust that everything will be all right in the end. That is our best chance right now in our situation, honestly. And that's what I do. So I try not to worry anymore. And it still breaks my heart when I look at the state of things. But you can still go ahead with a broken heart and say, okay, I don't need to fix that. It's cool. Everything's cool. And when it's the moment to take an action, you'll know. And you'll just take it. No hang up. I didn't intend this to be as long as it was. But I think I'm going to put this one out just as is. No edits. Take care, everybody. Have a good day tomorrow. And every day.